Stop and visit them today at Westside Decorating Center. And a good morning to you. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Art Lewis Show. We begin the hour talking about the Midland Business Alliance and some of their initiatives and things happening in Midland. And we do that with its president and CEO. We say good morning to Tony Stamas. Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Art. Great to be with you.
Same here. Hope you had a good New Year.
It was. It was very nice, and we're running into 2026.
So let's start there. Let's look at, first of all, what kind of a year was 2025 in Midland, and what kind of a year do you expect in 2026?
Yeah, every year you kind of get to what you expect, and then a whole bunch more of what you never could have guessed. And I think that 2025 was certainly that way. And but I think it really was a positive year. We continued. I think there's nationally, globally, in Michigan, still some wariness on the economic front, but we continued to see investment. I was thinking about our industrial park, which for 100 years was Dow's Michigan operations, but now you've got folks DuPont and Corteva, and certainly Dow oversees the whole thing and plays still leads that effort. But we had some new partners there, Roquette and Cunity, and we saw significant investment from in particular DuPont and Corteva there. And so that's fascinating. That 10 years ago, I think it's something you couldn't really have envisioned. And so that's great to see that continues to grow. And I think that's really it's kind of a hub for the industry really in the Midwest and in the nation.
Not to be a Debbie Downer, but I do have to ask, with Dow sort of having a financial hiccup, shall we say, over the last year or two, how does that impact you locally?
I think I think it's kind of in an industry of that size and the global nature, you're going to have ebbs and flows. But I think the team's doing a great job guiding it, and for well over a century, they've continued, over 125 years, continued to guide that. So I think they're adjusting, and they've made a number of announcements as they're trying to do that. So you certainly have an impact because they're just such a cornerstone legacy part of our community. But I also think there's people kind of understand, having lived it our whole life, that there's going to be times where they're going to have to look at what's happening in Europe, what's happening in South America, and kind of adjust the path so they can make sure that they continue to be a legacy company. And so it's sometimes when you see it in Michigan, it's the automotive industry, but certainly here in Midland, sometimes those global economic factors have different impacts for good and bad.
Yeah, they're so big because when they hiccup, everybody takes note.
Absolutely.
So 2026, you're an optimist?
I really am. Yeah, I think we're gonna continue to see investment in our community. We've got we just did a press release yesterday on broadband, and that's something that we've been working on for years. And there was a significant amount of federal funds that were allocated, but we've seen those come through now to the local level, to the states. And so at the end of last year, they'd had a process put in place in terms of how people were going to look at areas that aren't currently covered. And that was what we were focused on, working with Midland County, working with the Midland Area Community Foundation, Road Commission, lots of other folks, was how do we make sure people in Midland County have service? And it would be nice if it was affordable service that aren't covered right now. You love to see an overbuild where you have competition, but there's a lot of folks that aren't covered. And so the state went forward with grants, and it was about $500 million around or $1.5 billion rather throughout the whole state. And all of the areas in Midland are going to be covered. And so I think they have to have that done by end of 2029. So it won't happen overnight, but I think we all know that that's just kind of, if we didn't know it before COVID, we certainly knew it coming out of it, that you can work around the globe, you can make a doctor's appointment, you can do your assignments for Delta or Saginaw Valley State, but you need that connectivity. And so that was good news, and we're going to keep working just to make sure they don't hit any roadblocks, and we can help assist with the ISP providers however we can.
What do you estimate for a time frame in terms of coverage?
Yeah, they all have to be done by the end of 2029. I think some of them are going to be build outs of what they've already been doing, and so it's kind of expanding their footprint. Others will kind of be a new investment. So we had 10 providers that were granted that. Now, about 20% of them are satellite providers, and so we've kind of had some of that in the past. But in some areas, they say the best way to cover this area is through satellite options. So that one's one I think we'll have to, I don't think we have as much clarity exactly how that's going to work. But the vast majority will be actually physical connections.
It would, it seems to me, again, I'm looking at it from the outside in, but it would seem to me the satellite makes more sense because you get total coverage. No matter where you are, you should be able to pick one up rather than hardwire anymore.
Yeah, well, and I think there, those that are, know the industry say there's advantages and everything to both facets. But I agree. I think more and more we're going to see those options. And from our end, if you can have both options, that's great because then you kind of have a. You can do a price comparison and you can figure out what fits best for you and your family, your business. And so that's kind of our hope is just to encourage continued investment there. So that was exciting news. And I think, other counties around the state, this wasn't just Midland County, are seeing the same thing. And I think that will, I think that will serve our state well.
All right, let's talk about the number one issue that has been for a while, flood reduction and resiliency. First of all, we're at a point where we're going to see water come back into Sanford Lake. Where are we in the flood reduction area?
Yeah, we continue to move forward, and we've always kind of taken this at a couple levels. There's the, when we came into it, there was the immediate needs, and then there was kind of the interim, and then there's the long term. And on the long term, we've been got a partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they've been great partners with. They've got an agreement with the City of Midland, the County of Midland, and the Midland Business Alliance, and they're in the midst of a general investigation study. They kind of did the front end hydrological study where they kind of, made sure they had all the necessary information, and now they're looking at what the options could be, and then hopefully we'll take that and look to get support from our federal legislature on implementing those. But they're in the midst of that. That's a couple more years, but it's busy. We had a number of public hearings last year just talking about what they're going through and what types of things they're looking at. So that's been a great partnership. But we don't want to. That's really going to be critically important in terms of the long term, but we also want to be looking at, what we can be doing in the interim. And so, our state senator, our state representative, when we had a state senator, we're able to get a commitment of dollars, Kristen McDonald-Rivet and Bill Schuette, and to the city of Midland. And so now some of those were ARPA dollars, and they had to be spent in a pretty short time window. So the city went through a really good process to identify, okay, given the time frame on this, what projects would fit that, and the city council reviewed that and approved that. So they're right in the midst of that. And then we're looking at some other pieces that we think would really have an impact. And there are other, just, some of it is, we've got some funding within the county for debris removal. I mean, some of it's just kind of taking care of the basics. That's really important. But then others is, okay, if we set up some systems at different places here, how would that do to make sure that we control the flooding? So it's ongoing. We have weekly calls on it, working with our legislators have been great on a bipartisan basis at the federal and the state level, and certainly working with all of our local officials. So it's moving forward, never as quick as you'd like it to, but I think we're making real progress.
And the money that the state has provided that didn't have to be spent right away, not non-ARPA funds, that money's on hold?
Yes, I mean, some of it is going towards, some of it went towards working with the Army Corps of Engineers that the city appropriated, because you have to do matches on all those. And so, but then there's and we just last year, Representative Schuette was able to get another $10 million. Right. And so that's what we're working on. Is like, okay, what projects can we move forward on right now? And we're still getting the details. That went to the city of Midland on the specifics of those dollars. But yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think we want to keep working for long-term solutions, but we don't want to wait to the end of that either before implementing some of these other things that as we look at it and review it and do our homework, say, yeah, these could really help build resiliency. No one magic key, so trying to use lots of different paths.
All right, Tony, hang on. Got to take a break, and we'll be back. We're talking to Tony Stamas. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Midland Business Alliance.
For 60 years,
President and CEO of the Midland Business Alliance. I ask you this every time, but for those who might live in a shell, Tony, explain the Midland Business Alliance and what it is.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the opportunity. About 7-8 years ago, a lot of community leaders here in Midland looked at the Legacy Chamber, a great organization, Midland Tomorrow, a great organization. And I think they said, the mission is one and the same. It's how do we help businesses here in the community, how we help them grow, survive challenges, take advantage of opportunities, and how do we attract businesses? And so they combined it under the umbrella of the Midland Business Alliance. We've got a couple other partners that are kind of legacy, Midcon and CBM, that are great in their respective areas. And so it really is under the umbrella of the Midland Business Alliance. And I think it made sense because as we sit down and look at that mission, it is one and the same. But I always say that proof of concept is in a time of crisis when, there's no game plan on the shelves for a global pandemic or for a dam breach. And that was just kind of all hands on deck. How do we work together to help businesses in kind of a world we really don't have a clear path forward on? And I think, we've tried to build on that. And I think it's served our community well. And, I say the goal was to become the hub for all things business here in the community. And the good news is it's worked. And some days the bad news is it's worked. We're right in the middle of a lot of issues. But I've got a great team and, I think really making an impact over the short term and the long term.
If we separate out the chamber for a minute, how is membership now compared to before this alliance?
It's good. I think we saw, and a lot of chambers saw a drop during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was just, so many of the events went. They went down, but we've seen solid, new membership continuing to bring new people in, which is always exciting. And I think we always want to make sure we're giving a strong value proposition. Come to Wake Up Midland on February 6th. We do ribbon cuttings, which we've got an amazing group of ambassadors that turn out for those. We kind of want to help big and small promote the businesses and kind of help get the word out for them in our community and our region.
And the other side of the alliance then is the development side, right?
Economic development, it is, and like I said, you kind of work hand in hand. But yeah, that's a great organization. We've kind of, we're in the traditional spaces of economic development. We're helping those businesses. We're working with them, want to help them grow, or if there's a challenge in their path, how do we kind of navigate that? Connecting them with the right tools at the state level. We work together with all of our regional partners on economic development on the federal level. And then last year, we kind of engaged with some support from community leaders in a business attraction effort. I mentioned we've got a unique asset with the iPark and a great opportunity. The infrastructure's there. If you're trying to site a manufacturing, you need certain components, and that's an area that has all of those components in there. So kind of helping get the word out domestically and even internationally about the opportunity that exists there, because we've got a great cross-section of global partners and, with the DuPont and Corteva and Trinzio and Cabot and, some newer ones, Roquette and Cunity. And so, and obviously Dow, and, they work, help supply for HSC. So really kind of an interconnectivity, but thinks an opportunity to even grow that more.
The question is, where do you house them all?
Housing is it is, and like I said, that's there's kind of the traditional area which we chatted on, but then there's other areas like, okay, if you're going to grow those jobs, people need a place to live, And so, we created Housing Forward, and Jen Acosta has been leading that, works with Nicole Wilson on our team, doing a great job. And actually, their work with Michigan, we're leading this regional housing effort, and working with all of our regional partners. So we're going to have March 4th over at the Midland Center for the Arts, a regional housing summit. And there was one before. The Great Lakes Bay Regional Alliance had done a great job with bringing us together. So we're kind of building and having one of those. So that'll be coming up just in about a month and a half. And just because there is a lot of commonality on the changes, we have seen as we've worked with the state, a recognition that there's traditional tools in place for what we would think of as affordable housing, working with MSHDA, working with HUD. But really, a huge part of it is attainable or workforce housing. It's tough to make the business case for developers to build on that. And yet we need that because it has a domino effect, that if you can have that piece there for workforce housing, well, somebody might have started on affordable, and then they have the ability to move into attainable housing, and that opens it up at every level. So that's really been our focus, and we've had some, I think, last year we did a ribbon cutting for River Caddis, which is going to be over 200 units, apartments, which does a really good job. But we updated our regional housing study, and that kind of gives us, some solid data on what we need. And I mean, when people say what kind of housing you need, my answer is yes. We need it across the whole spectrum, but just really kind of talking and saying, okay, how can we support local developers around the state in terms of making those investments here?
So if we look into the Staubus crystal ball of housing, 5 or 10 years down the road, what does housing look like? What's the majority of it?
Yeah, I think hopefully it's a real mix. It kind of reflects, infill where you've already got, housing properties developed, and maybe you're adding, additional housing options within that. Whether it's, what you might have thought of as the apartment above the garage, but maybe you're adding there. There's some communities that have done this. Jen Acosta came up, Yigby, Yes in God's Backyard, where some churches have large parcels of property, and they're using those to develop housing options. And so I think it's really going to be creative. I mean, I think you're going to see some new developments, which we need that. But, we've kind of changed. And when you kind of look at the demographics, our family sizes are different. We've kind of changed, and so we need to reflect that change. And there's going to be some that are looking for apartments, some that are looking for condos, some that are looking for traditional housing. But it really needs to be a mix. And I think if we're successful in this, and it'll never be perfect, but if we do this well, and I think we're on a great path, I think that it helps us, but it obviously helps the whole region, because there's people that live here, work in Saginaw, work in Bay, and vice versa, and so it serves us all well.
Which brings us to the next question. Since you have those workers throughout the Great Lakes Bay region, any progress in regional transportation?
Yeah, I know that it continues to be an effort. I know that, the MBS has played a real role in that, Saginaw Valley State as well. So I think it's, again, as with many things, they don't happen as quickly. But I think all the parties are talking, and they're saying, okay, how can we remove these barriers? And so if you're on Dial-A-Ride or County Connection in Midland, how can we make that a smooth transition to go to your place of work over in Saginaw or Bay? And so I think it's an ongoing effort, and some others have been leading that, but I really give them a credit, and we're all stand ready to help with that, because transportation, childcare, housing. We don't have to do it perfect, but if we can do it, even better than some of our other regions and some of our other states, it really gives us a tremendous advantage.
Right. Let me ask one final thing before I let you go here. In terms of business, how are businesses doing in Midland County specifically these days? Is it
generally
good business market?
There really seems to be. I mean, we see new businesses start up. We've seen expansions of existing business. So I think there's a positive mindset, and we're encouraged by that. Like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty, kind of around the country and around the globe, but we continue to see people making that investment, and I think they're optimistic. I mean, I think when you do that, coming from a small business background, you have to have a built-in sense of optimism. But I think as people continue to do that, and we see those startups, those expansions, that reflects that. And If I can, before we go, I want to
no.
make sure I put a plug in for February 3rd.
Okay.
As I look outside to the snow and the cold, nobody's thinking about Election Day, or maybe many are not thinking about Election Day. I told my wife the other day, I said, knocked on a lot of doors over the years, and I always like doing that. You kind of get to talk to people one-on-one. I never had to do it in negative degree temperature, so a credit to all those that are running. But just make sure everybody's out there votes. We're actually doing a video series with the Bay Chamber and the Saginaw Chamber that'll be coming out here in a few days, where we're interviewing. We offered to all the candidates. We're interviewing all the candidates we heard for in about 20-minute clips from a business perspective, getting theirs. And so we'll be sharing those, and so people can make an informed decision. But whatever you decide, just make sure your voice is heard on February 3rd and get out and vote.
Amen, because, I heard enough people complain about the fact that we didn't have representation. Well, here's your opportunity to fix it.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, listen, Tony, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you down the road again.
Always enjoy it. Thanks, Art.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye now.
You too.
Tony Stamas from the Midland Business Alliance. We're going to take a break. Come back. We'll have open phones for the remainder of the hour, 989-752-6111.
Gotta go.
All right, we're back with you here on WSGW. Open phones for the remainder of the hour, 989-752-6111. Have you heard about the Board of Peace? The Board of Peace, proposed by President Trump. On January 16th, he sent out invites to world leaders to sit on the board. And the board, as it was described, will embark on a bold new approach to resolving global conflicts. And it also mentions that the language indicates organizations could get involved in other conflicts behind Gaza. Now, this is not the same as NATO, nor is it the same as the United Nations, and many of the leaders look at it as maybe undermining the United Nations. One of those leaders is President Macron of France. He has said he will not sit on it. And the next thing he heard from President Trump, quote, "I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes and he'll join." But he doesn't have to join. It's an interesting idea, but does it override or somehow undermine what the United Nations is supposed to do or what NATO does? I think it's a good idea for the leaders of these leading countries to sit down and talk about how to resolve issues instead of going out on their own and doing it. Certainly Gaza tops the list. But and it's a new idea. Question is, first of all, to join the board, countries must pay $1 billion for a permanent seat, or else, if they don't, they're offered a 3-year term. And Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban quickly accepted the invitation in a social media post. And Vietnam Communist Party chief To Lam also accepted. By the way, Vladimir Putin was invited to join the peace board. Haven't heard from him. And he's looking for ways to solve some of the world's problems. And I don't know if that includes his notion of Greenland, but he said he's slapping tariffs on 8 European countries until such time as a deal is reached for the complete and total purchase of Greenland. President said Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland will face a 10% tariff on all goods starting February 1st, increasing to 25% on June 1st. On the one hand, I'm glad that statement doesn't say anything about using force to take over Greenland. On the other hand, do we really need control of Greenland? I don't think so. I think we ought to sit down and negotiate a deal, maybe to put in more air defenses, maybe build a bigger base. Okay, I can see that, because it is an important piece of property for attacks that could come over the North Pole. But by the same token, I just don't think we have the right to march all over the world saying, well, I want that land and I want that land, so everybody else get out. It bothers me that we would do that. But in terms of its importance and ways of using its importance, yes, I would say let's negotiate that. Take a quick break here. We'll come back. We'll get to Gene when we do. With you here on WSGW, and Gene is in Bay City. Gene, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my call.
Yep.
At the beginning, everybody, including Democrats and independents, wanted gang members and criminals and so on. They wanted investigations, and they wanted these people caught and thrown out of the country. But I don't think there are very many people that are happy with the amount of men now on the streets.
I might disagree with you. The poll numbers show that it's pretty well split.
Well, there was a police captain or in charge, whatever, was on saying that his police officers that were off duty in street clothes in the regular cars, how many of his officers have been stopped by ICE? Well, there was a Republican talk show host on last week, and he had said that now people, especially, in certain states, feel they have to keep papers on themselves proving that they're an American citizen.
Those states specifically would be what? Sanctuary states, blue states with sanctuary cities, where they don't cooperate with law enforcement?
Anyhow, he said...
You didn't answer the question.
Well, I'm not sure. Let's say it is Minneapolis. He said... He had said... You made me lose my train of thought. He had said people all have to carry proof of citizenship. And his remark was, in America, it's never been that way, that you always had to prove you were a citizen, and he made the remark.
Well, also in America, it's never been the way that a city told the federal government, we're not going to cooperate with you. We're going to turn these people loose rather than give them to you. Never had that either.
Well, anyway, the end of his remark was, having people having to show their papers all the time. He said, "What are we now, the Gestapo?" Because that's what went on in Germany. Everybody was guilty until they proved themselves innocent. I think it's gotten to the point where